Have you ever heard of the Strava Jockey? This is I guess it's like a job you can get. Did you know about
No,
this?
tell me, what's a Strava
Okay, all
Jockey?
right. All right. This started as a joke, but actually, there's people out there who, for money, will run and run up your Strava stats for you. So they run and they charge people per mile. So for distance or speed. Oh, you want me to run faster? I will do it, but for extra money. And I think this is just genius. And, for either mountain biking or running, like you and I we could really be putting like the hustle inside hustle here. This is
Dude, I
incredible.
need a Strava Jockey. I couldn't be, like, making an extra, stream of income or revenue off of being somebody else's Strava Jockey. I'm the one who actually needs this service. Is there anybody out there who can pad my stats on Strava?
Look, man, I'm all for it. Anybody needs a Strava jockey, drop me a DM. But I just want to riff on this with you for a little bit because I've got some ideas because I think the idea of Strava jockey, I mean, look, there are people who are buying followers, people who buy views and likes and all that stuff. And so it was only a matter of time before that landed on Strava, right? So I'm not surprised at this, but I am thinking that there's even more that we could be doing with it. And I want to just kind of riff on some ideas with you. Uh, there's some easy ways, right? Like paying per crown, paying for KOMs. That could be an upcharge. Uh, One thing that we could do is maybe we could call our famous friends and charge. So, like, imagine you run, maybe this one, you don't have somebody run for you, but if you did run a certain segment, what if Killian messaged you or commented on your thing, right? For an extra $50. It's like
It's
Cameo
like an o
for your
yeah,
Strava.
OnlyFans for Strava. Only shreds.
Okay, I came up with a few other ideas besides coordinating legends to comment on your Strava. What about let's see here. So social media is like an easy one, right? So I'll make sure that not only do you have a sick Strava post, but I'm going to make sure that you have legit photos that go with it. You let me know if you're running in Hoka's or Speedlands or Salomon or whatever. I'll make sure I'm wearing those shoes and I'll shoot those shoes on the trail so it feels even more legitimate, right? I feel like that's an upsell that I could offer. Any ideas? Any you want to throw in here?
None that come to mind, but it is funny that for a long time, yeah, people have been buying followers on Twitter and Instagram, probably TikTok too. And now that phenomenon is translated to the athletic world, and what a sad state of affairs. There is a long and storied history of people cheating in endurance sport. There's been a lot of these investigative pieces where journalists have gone through like deep analysis and investigated cheaters in big city marathons and exposed people for jumping on bicycles halfway through the race, putting on disguises so that they don't appear like they're in the event, and then disrobing and jumping back in the race miles down the course and collecting age group prizes as a result. So it's a sad state of affairs, but I guess it's human nature to want to cut courses sometimes, but not for us here, not for us, buddy.
Hey, I'm down to run for anybody who needs the assist or ride, whatever you need. Happy to do it. So I get it. There's certain levels of this stuff, but you're busy. I get it. You need somebody to knock down some stats for you. I'm not mad. Look,
It's sort
there's
of like,
there's
oh, I've
other
got a coach. I'm paying $300 a month to get this training program, but I'm useless. I'm too busy. I can't get the training in. I got to pay somebody so that my coach doesn't, isn't always on my case, wondering why I'm not uploading my files and actually thinks I'm in good fitness.
maybe a more legit thing to do to offer in addition or just separate from the Strava jockey thing. Let's set that aside. Maybe you're like a partner where you go run with them and shoot photos of them for their Strava to enhance their Strava, but you're not cheating. I feel like that's probably the right answer here. But again, there's apps like TaskRabbit where you can pay people to stand in line for you. Is this really that different? I
I don't know, man. This could be a burgeoning industry. Let's put this in
don't know.
remember how we wanted to have a segment called Galaxy Brain?
This is a galaxy brain idea. We could build on this for sure.
Galaxy Brain segment. All right, if there's anybody out there who wants to be my Strava jockey, I'll post a job description on LinkedIn and you can apply because Lord knows I need it right now. Actually, I got a 13.5 mile workout in today, Lucy. I'm actually feeling pretty banged up from it, but also proud of myself. I'm actually like 2 weeks deep back into training now, getting serious. You know, life is
Dude,
business, business is sport, sport is life. So I'm
we're back on it, man. We are in our like health kick season together. This is
health
awesome.
kick. All right, so we got a great docket here today. If you're ready to move off the Strava jockey stuff, we wanted to start with Courtney's signature shoe that just got launched from Salomon and promptly sold out. We'll talk a little Olympic stuff. We'll probably do a job of the week, finish with BPC. But let's get started with Courtney's shoe. In one of our earliest episodes, Aaron introduced the idea of audience led product. And this is obviously an example of that. So, Aaron, maybe get us started on Courtney's shoe reactions to the instant sellout.
Yes, instant sellout, no surprise. And Courtney has demonstrated this multiple times over. The fact that her signature flavor with Tailwind sold out so quickly, and then they put it into their regular lineup. No surprise there. Her vibe as an athlete is just incredible. Everything that surrounds her, I feel like, is so positive and incredible. And she doesn't do a ton of partnerships. So when stuff like this comes out, everybody jumps on it and swoops it up right away. So no surprise there. She commands the attention of that audience, and when she does something special like this, people are on it. The shoes look great. These are shoes that you would probably pick out of the lineup no matter what. And I think there's something to be said for, it is a signature colorway, but they look rad no matter what. It's not like they're asking you to buy a shoe that you wouldn't want to run in. These are really cool looking shoes. The one question that I have about it is it a signature shoe or a signature colorway? And there's something that kind of goes along with that, where there are like the Speed Goat from Hoka, that shoe is Carl's. And as long as Carl is on the team and in the program, that shoe exists, and vice versa. Whereas a colorway, it's kind of a one and done as far as we can tell. And it even says a limited edition. So I wonder the actual value to Courtney on this one. It's a nice to do. And, Solomon has done some other things, right? They had the short knees, like the
Which
shorts that she
also, I
wears.
believe, sold out almost instantaneously.
Yeah. It's like a nice look for them to do that. And it makes a ton of sense. Like, why wouldn't you do that? I just wonder, why wouldn't they make a shoe that was her shoe that you could support by year round and she could get a residual from? Now, the thing that's kind of interesting about that is that, in the case of Carl and the Speed Goat shoe, his career has, kind of run its course. He's still running, obviously, but he's not the number one runner in the space. Yet Hoka still has to pay residuals, and he still, claims that even without having to turn in the results. And if you do a signature colorway like this, you're not bound to that long term relationship, although it would be smart to lock in Courtney for a long time. uh so doing these sort of one-offs like this makes sense in the short term, but a long-term investment in her, that'd be a great way to keep her around. The really interesting thing is, if you do that, it's a really interesting conversation. And at Red Bull, we had a very similar problem where we would take an athlete and then we would invest heavily into their content on YouTube, or make a film or whatever. Let's use Travis Rice as an example, right? Snowboarder. We made The Art of Flight with him. That was the greatest snowboard film of all time. It blew up on iTunes. It was everywhere. Well, now you get back to the negotiation table with Travis Rice, and he's like, well, now I'm the most famous snowboarder on the planet because my movie that you funded is
Hmm.
actually made me even more
It's a chicken
famous.
or the
So
egg
now,
thing.
yeah, now you owe me more money because I'm more famous, but I'm famous. I mean, let's be fair. He was already like a big deal, but because you poured all this fuel on the fire, now I'm even more expensive to deal with that you have to pay for. And so you get in this like loop where you're the one that's adding a lot of value, but then you have to pay more money for that athlete because they're so valuable. Where do you come down on this whole thing? That being said, I think, for Solomon, for Courtney, she's a really safe bet in terms of athletes. She's got a great everything about her, like her momentum, her results, her vibe. Like she'd be somebody worth
Superstar,
investing in. Yeah.
transcendent
Yeah.
athlete,
Yeah.
generational talent.
The only thing I'll say just to wrap up my point with it is, part of it is the Speed Goat shoe, as the other example in trail running, for example, that was the right shoe at the right time. And whether or not Carl was attached to it, having a shoe that was capable of running 100 milers, that was well designed, that looked cool, that did its job, it was going to probably do well with or without him. And it was sort of serendipitous that they had him to be the face of that shoe. But would it have succeeded with or without Carl? Yeah, maybe. I think, hard to say what was the determining factor in the success. And I think same thing with Solomon. These shoes look awesome. And whether Courtney is attached to them or not, they're probably going to sell a lot of these shoes. And, for them to come out with a signature shoe, it has to be different enough. It has to be something that's going to stand alone, that's going to sell. And, yeah, exist for a long
Yeah,
time.
so this is the S Lab Genesis limited Courtney edition. So to your point, it is more of a signature colorway than a signature product, and it sort of matches the racing kit on the apparel side that she's been using for the last year or so. So sort of gives her a branded head to toe option that feels very specific to her, to Courtney Dauwalter, the greatest trail runner of all time, arguably. It makes me remember, I just had an interesting conversation actually at TrailCon with Robert Mook, who is the global head of sports marketing for Adidas Terrex. And I asked him on the panel a question about Tom Evans, who had won Western States the year before wearing a prototype version of a new shoe from Adidas Terrex. I think it's called the Agravic Speed Ultra, something. It's like their plated trail running super shoe. And I asked him the question of like, what kind of difference does that make when an athlete has that sort of huge competitive success? How does that translate to this commercial success of a product? And this is, I think, a great evidence of the fact that athletes do move product. Of course, what we haven't mentioned, at least like super explicitly, is that the inventory sold out immediately on Courtney's shoe, like within a day. We don't know the number of shoes that they ordered or the number that were available. Was it 200 or was it 2000? Was it more than that? And that obviously has implications for just how of a profound economic impact Courtney has on the brand. But for example, I see these Adidas Speed Ultra shoes around all the time now. You never saw their brand around before. It is a better product, but Tom Evans and his victory at Western States using that product probably has a material impact on the subjective feeling that I have that I see him around more often. The other thing that I can say is that with Speedland and our small brand, Cam Hanes, who has 1.5 million followers or whatever it is on Instagram, I know for a fact that dude moves product, and we've made 2 signature commissions for him, which is more or less the same thing. It's like a signature colorway. There's some variations between the models. We try and make small improvements. Dave and Kevin really are the guys who make the small improvements between commissions, but it's more or less like a signature colorway that has specific design details for Cam Hanes. But I know for a fact that dude moves product. Another great example of audience led product, using somebody with specific fan base, a specific influence with a specific consumer, and leveraging that audience to sell your product. Anything you want to add to that? I mean, from your experience, like at Aura, I know you guys worked with a lot of people and you probably have some insight as to what was successful, what wasn't, but also like some things, another theme that we've talked about on the podcast a number of times, using the analog of Killian and Normal, is like, well, at what point does it make sense for Courtney to maybe have equity in one of these businesses? You know, if she's the one who's going to be moving that type of a product, Obviously, it's complicated, it's capital intensive to try and start your own brand. Killian partnered up with Camper, who sort of had the legacy, the experience, and the capital to fund the start of Normal as a brand. But Courtney is clearly bigger than the sport, in some ways maybe even bigger than Salomon, at least in terms of her exposure to the trail running market. So just an interesting thing to contemplate as we discuss this audience led product. Like, maybe any experience you have of seeing the impact firsthand at the brands that you worked at, and anything you want to add about, what other things Courtney could do.
Well, skateboarding is probably the number one place to look when it comes to signature shoes, and the one of the best-selling skate shoes of all time is the Vans Half Cab, and that shoe is based off of Steve Caballero, one of the most legendary skaters of all time. And again, it goes back to this point of it was the right shoe for skateboarding at the right time, and he became the face, and everything just kind of fit together perfectly. It wasn't like they took a shoe off the shelf and slapped his name on it or made him a colorway. They really committed to putting those two things together at exactly the right time. And I think the Speed Goat shoe is the best corollary to that. And what I think is really interesting is that throughout skateboarding, they've done this with a handful of athletes, DC shoes and Vans and Circa, like all these brands have come out with signature shoes. And it was kind of like a thing for a while in skateboarding where you you signed with the brand and you had a set of skate shoes. Next one I'd put up is maybe like basketball, right? But it really just came down to the design of the shoes and the excitement around the shape of it and everything. But what really ended up was that it connected these athletes in a way where it took care of them, and they were able to stay in the sport and stay relevant for a long period of time, and they were able to open up even more doors for more people. And I just wonder if because it was a life-changing moment for these skaters, and like you mentioned on a previous pod, for Carl as well. And what would that mean for Courtney to have sort of a life-changing shift in terms of having a signature shoe with Solomon, having something that more people actually put on their feet, outside of the trail running community potentially. That could be really interesting. And then what would that mean for her? I think that's really exciting, and it shows these brands investing in these athletes on such a different level. It's the equivalent, and I think even doing this signature colorway like this, it's the equivalent of what we were talking about with the Surfer's Journal, the Adventure Journal, Mountain Gazette, where advertising in these magazines isn't necessarily going to move the maximum amount of product, but it's bringing you a ton of credibility, because when you show up in ways like this, the audience who's paying attention sees that and says, "Ah, these guys know what's up.
Mm.
Like they're here, and this is meaningful." And so I think uh, I don't know how many shoes Solomon actually made of this colorway, but I don't think they needed to make more than 10 to prove the point that they are invested in this space, that they are paying attention. Clearly, they've built an amazing roster over, the last decade of trail runners and stuff. But this is just another reminder like, hey, we're paying attention. Here we are. I hope they made more than 10 shoes, by the
Well, they
way. But
made a
I'm
full
just,
size run, from
yeah,
it looks like men's size 4.5 to men's size 14.
yeah.
So
Yes, absolutely. There's a ton of these. So I mean, I've got to imagine they must have known that this was going to sell quite a few shoes right out of the gate, and exciting to see this. I mean, name another athlete that could sell out an entire stock of shoes like instantly.
yeah, it's like
That's
only Killian who has his own brand. I wonder, Hoka's going to be launching their new Tecton X trail shoe, which is what Jim Walmsley just won Western States in. I bet that will have a similar impact in the market and probably move very quickly. So maybe they're adjusting their inventory based on Jim's performance and based on the success of Courtney's shoe. One thing I was going to add here, I don't know how closely you follow sneaker culture. Harmony is actually really in to sneaker culture, and I've become exposed at least peripherally and find it pretty fascinating. But one of the things that's been happening with some of these signature basketball sneakers or whatever that will be dropped by Nike or Adidas or New Balance. The ones that are like very special edition. I know there's been problems where on the websites of these brands, people will set up like bot accounts that will just buy the inventory because they know they can sell it secondhand at a markup on platforms like StockX. So I went and checked on StockX if we could find any of the Courtney shoe. In other words, to see if people bought the shoe to resell it. Wasn't available on StockX. So to me, that says that the people who bought the shoe were not bots. They were people who are fans of Courtney, who wanted the product and who are going to use the product or at least keep it as a collector's item to memorialize all her great success. So pretty awesome stuff.
They're really cool looking
They are.
shoes. I mean,
I would
and
have bought a
that's
pair too. I would have if they were available.
that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? Like just make good product automatically, like it's gonna have some traction. Add in the athlete, do something special with them, you know.
Lucy, here's my signature shoe. You see the Free Trail Signpost logo on it. People are going to have to go subscribe to our YouTube to get a visual of that. But that was one of the coolest moments of my running career was to have my own signature shoe. So shout out to Speedland for
You know,
allowing me.
those are the shoes I run in too. I mean, I sent you a picture this weekend from Mount Hood.
Yeah, you
They're getting some
getting
miles
the
now.
miles in. All right, sweet. Well, congratulations to Solomon and Courtney on that great launch. My guess is they'll probably want to keep that momentum going with some more branded stuff. Another thing, actually, that's interesting before we move off this, after Courtney won Hard Rock for the third time, we did a live podcast at a bar, right? Like literally 8 hours after she finished. And Solomon also makes like she's got her own logo. It's like a peace sign that makes a C and a D. So it's
Mhm.
funny, you know, you'll remember when Tiger Woods was a Nike athlete and he had that TW logo lockup that was like specific to him and his product. So he'd have the swoosh, but then he'd also have the TW logo. Courtney's got that too on her apparel. So, you know, a mark of a
That's
great
cool.
athlete is when they have their own logo, when they have their signature product. So congrats to Courtney. Congrats to
What do
Solomon.
you what do you think on the re-up? You think Solomon will re-release that? You think they'll restock?
It's a good question. I mean, this is a fun thought experiment is like, whoa, that had an impact. But scarcity is also attractive, right? So
Mhm.
you wouldn't want to flood the market with the product because it would dilute the feeling of limited edition that this is a special product that's available only to people who are really fans of Courtney. So I mean, obviously they're going to want to go back to the well eventually, but maybe this is a once a year thing. Maybe it's every 6 months or I don't know.
I wonder if they could get away with like selling it as a full capsule where you have to buy the head to toe kit,
That'd be
where
fire.
you can't get just the shoes or just the shorts. You got to get the full kit.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Well, awesome. All right, let's talk some Olympic stuff. Man, first and foremost, the Olympics has been absolutely fire this summer. Have you been watching?
I've been like in and out, but yes, absolutely. The memes that are coming out of the Olympics are insane.
Dude, it's been so fun to watch. I don't know. It after Tokyo, I was just like, the Olympics are dead. Like this is never coming
Yeah.
back. And
Yeah.
now, man, it's been so entertaining. The Team USA has been absolutely on a heater, just dominant in terms of medal count. And it's actually also not just a subjective feeling. It seems like this is objectively true based on the ratings. So I have some stats here. I think I got this from the New York Times. Not entirely sure exactly who to credit here, but it was from a reliable source, let's just say. It says through the first 5 days of the games, an average of 34 million people were consuming primetime coverage on Peacock and NBC, up 79% from the pandemic delayed Tokyo Games, according to NBC, based on data from Nielsen and Adobe Analytics. 79% increase in ratings. Do you attribute that? I
Whoa.
mean, the only thing I can attribute that to is Peacock is just a better experience this time. Just the user interface they've really improved. But
Mhm.
also like just the athletes competing in the empty stadiums and stuff in Tokyo just had this dystopian eerie vibe to it that just made it like really hard to watch. in my opinion. And now with the big crowds in Paris, like, I don't know, it feels like more of a heroic sporting event that the Olympics has always been known for. What do you think?
Well, I think the other thing about it too is that brands are actually activating around the event. And if you think about the lead up to the Olympics, what you could do around the last Olympics was pretty limited. At that point, if you remember, most of us were still kind of in our houses. We weren't going to athlete shoots. We weren't having photo shoots, video shoots. We weren't creating a ton of content because it was still kind of weird to like be around each other. And so I wonder if just like the hype train was not on full blast, even getting into the Olympics to get people thinking about it, getting people excited about it, the amount of content that could have even been created prior to the Olympics, not counting the Olympics, but just that run up to it, where this time around, I felt the momentum culturally leading into the Olympics. And you kind of pulled this audience into it because everybody was like just dumping content left, right, and center. And I've got to wonder if maybe that even run up had a big impact on
Mm.
it. I mean, Paris is such a huge place to bring it, and everybody's there, and it's like an iconic, and not to say Tokyo isn't, but I just feel like, yeah, the energy that came into Paris this year was incredible. And I think there was a lot of momentum coming into it. And maybe it's sort of this pent up energy too from the last couple of years of really just wanting to get to the Olympic Games and have a quote unquote normal one again.
So good. This was the idea I had last night. I mean, it's such a fun thing. And what a great, I mean, commercial opportunity for the media companies, for the brands, and for the athletes. And it feels like it's a massive missed opportunity to only have it every 4 years, if we're being honest. Like the Winter Olympics, maybe that we only need that every four, but it feels like every two for the Summer Olympics would be great. And what they could do is use the model of what they've done in college football for the championship game is like, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl, etc. And they'd bounce between the two. So if you had like one venue on each continent and just rotate around so that like every 10 years it's on your continent, something like that,
Hmm.
and increase the frequency of it, I think it'd be better, honestly. It's like, because basically what they do is after the Olympics, 2 years later is the World Championship. And it's like, okay, well, that's the World Championship. But it's like for each individual sport. So
Hmm.
specific for track and field, right? Like 2 years from now, there'll be a World Championship. And then, but it's like, why don't you just make that the Olympics again and get everybody together? Especially because when they build out these venues wherever they host the Olympics, they then decay and they oftentimes are wasted and not really used once the Olympics
Yeah.
depart. So anyway, that was my idea. Moving on though, maybe let's
I don't,
do you want to
well, I mean, you made the point with Courtney's kit about scarcity, and I think that is actually the secret sauce of the Olympics is the scarcity, because a lot of athletes, I think, look at this event and they're like, okay, I only get two shots at this at best, or maybe three. Some people are able to really stretch it
yeah.
out, but you only get a few shots at that Olympic medal, and I think that the scarcity of it is probably the only thing that sets it apart. I mean,
Yeah,
every
but
other
dude,
sport.
business is business, right? I mean, the NFL went from 16 games to 17 games as soon as they realized they could make an extra $1 billion, and now they're already talking about going to 18 games.
So your pitch is for Olympics Junior,
I mean,
not
I
a
mean,
second one.
listen, I don't, I'm speaking as somebody who does not know anything about the Olympics and the governing bodies. And I'm sure there's a very good reason it only happens every 4 years. But me as a fan, as a spectator, as somebody who's been watching it for the last 2 weeks, I wish it was every 2 years instead of every four.
I'm there with you.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk quickly about outdoor sports in the Olympics, because obviously, what a venue, what a platform to expose the miracle of outdoor sporting competition to a massive mainstream global audience. One thing to touch on briefly before we get to you educating us on some of the mountain bike stuff, which is more endemic to your world, that photo of Gabriel Medina floating over the top of the wave in Chapu with his finger up in the air after a beautiful ride on a amazing wave in French Polynesia. That's sort of the photo of the Olympics. Like, what kind of impact does that have on surfing, on Gabriel? Like, when that photo is splashed across billions of mobile devices, probably for 2 weeks, it's good for the sport, probably, huh?
It's good for the Olympics too, because and I think that's a big reason why they have these new sports in there. They've added BMX, they've added skate, they've added surf, they've added breakdancing recently. And for one of the main photos from the Olympics to be a surf photo is there's a lot of high fives happening in the back halls of the IOC, probably being like, haha, we did it, because it's not a sure thing that if you add a sport to the Olympics, it's going to have a tangible effect on it. So to have these kind of images come from it. What's also interesting about surfing in the Olympics is that it's in Tahiti, which is a French colony. Chopu is one of the best waves. It's a big wave in the world. There are tons and tons of projects that have gone down. There's actually a Robbie Madison motocross project that went down on
Oh,
that wave.
really?
Even
I remember
it's
that.
a
I didn't
it's a
realize it was there.
legendary. Yeah. The first ever 360 camera was used on Chopu before GoPros existed, basically. Is this immersive technology, and somebody surfed Chopu with like a 25-pound backpack on. That wave is legendary in so many ways. And for the Olympics to recognize that they had that, or I guess for France to recognize that they had that in their arsenal, is a huge thing. It must have been kind of weird doing like the opening ceremonies from like thousands of miles
Yeah.
away, but big props to them because yeah, they have a lot of opportunities. It doesn't sound like the triathlon got the same kind of treatment as surfing did, but yeah, there's a lot of amazing terrain and a lot of places within in France that you could actually host some of these events, and it's cool that they didn't just like put it on some random wave,
Yeah. Dope. So, yeah, I've heard that Chopu is also one of the most dangerous waves in the world, and that it actually translated to the local language means wall of skulls, which makes it terrifying and also awesome. And actually, this reminds me, tying it back to our Courtney Dauwalter discussion. I was in San Diego last weekend, which is, of course, rich with surf culture, and it came up in conversation between Harmony and I. John Florence, who was on Team USA in Chopu this past week, he's got his own brand, Florence Marine X. Have you ever looked at this brand?
Mm-mm.
Oh, check
No.
it out sometime. Maybe we could do a deeper dive on John Florence. But short story is, he's an icon. I think he's from the North Shore of Oahu, and he's got a couple of brothers who I think are also professional surfers. But when Hurley was going through big financial troubles a few years ago, they let go of athletes like Rob Machado and John Florence. And instead of signing with another big surf brand, he started his own brand. It's called Florence Marine X,
Hmm.
which is kind of a rough name. I think they should just call it Florence. But anyway, it looks like cool product. They've got a cool logo, and he's like one of those transcendent athletes like Courtney. Anyway, a little bit of a sidetrack, a little bit of a tangent, but something for you to check out, Lucy, something that our audience can check out too. Tell
Also, related to John, he has a signature flavor of Cliff Bar, the white chocolate macadamia nut. That's
Bomb.
him.
That's so good.
So, yeah,
All right, tell me about what happened in mountain biking. Was it good for the sport, bad for the sport, neutral? Tell me.
I'm gonna say probably neutral. The course itself was not that epic I mean, it's great, but it's like I think I don't know. Tokyo was actually a really, really challenging course, and there were definitely some hems and haws about this one. Pauline Fran Prevost won the event, and it was kind of this cool crowning moment for her. She had announced before the Olympics that she was basically leaving mountain biking and going to back to road racing, which is where she started. Actually, she was world champ in 2014. So we kind of knew that this is kind of her last big. I mean, she'll still compete in mountain bike world champs this year, but next season she's on road bikes again. So this is like her last shot. Again, going back to that scarcity discussion, it was kind of her last shot doing it. So very cool to see her on the top of the podium. One of the stories that I really like though is Jenny Risved's. She was the Olympics before Tokyo. She won the gold medal in mountain biking, and she stepped away from mountain biking after the gold medal to take care of like her mental health because things got crazy after, you win a gold medal and like there's a lot that happens after that. There's a lot of
Oh,
fanfare, there's a
yeah.
lot of focus, there's a lot of
That's a
pressure.
huge phenomenon.
Yeah, like
Athletes
after
falling
you
into
have
big
this.
depression even after they win gold medals.
Yeah. So she took a step away from mountain biking and a couple years ago came back to the sport. So she had like everything, Olympic medal, top of the world, just completely like, I'm done. Thank you. And when she came back, it was like it kind of looked like she was just kind of dipping her toe back in the water, like, I don't know, I'm just gonna ride for fun and just see what happens. And then over the last couple of years, she's become more and more you know, of a podium favorite. And she came back and won a bronze medal this year. So to see her kind of go from gold medal completely out of the sport, then kind of tiptoeing back in and now back on an Olympic podium. That for me was one of my favorite stories.
Rad.
Yeah, a couple other good stories in outdoor sports. Chloe Dygert, who I originally signed to Red Bull way back in the day, just scored a gold medal. And actually, she was in the road race and had a crash, and then got back on the bike and got a bronze medal. But then in the team pursuit, the whole team got a gold medal this year, which was their first one in team pursuit. So a lot of cool bike stuff happening. And of course, now freestyle BMX is in the Olympics, which just, yeah, so cool. If I could have one wish, it would be to put downhill mountain biking in the Olympics, which I think would be really exciting and something that that would probably have a way bigger impact on the sport. Not to say cross country mountain biking isn't cool, but I feel like downhill mountain biking has got a little bit of like a motocross vibe to it. It's a bit faster, scarier, bigger jumps. I don't know. I feel like that would actually play pretty well on TV and people would get down with that. So um, that's my
Yeah.
hope for future
Cool.
Olympics.
Yeah, your comment about Chloe reminded me about Kristen Faulkner, who won the women's road race, got a gold medal for Team
Yes.
USA. She's got a fascinating story. Apparently, a venture capitalist who only took up cycling like 4 or 5 years ago, and comes through in Paris and brings home a gold medal. Like
Two gold
two gold.
medals. Two.
Yeah, she got another one.
She was on team pursuit with
Yeah,
Chloe. Yeah. Yeah.
rad.
Pretty incredible. Pretty
See, this is
incredible.
why that's why the Olympics is so fun. It's so cool. But to your point, on a downer note, yeah, that whole like depression thing, obviously from Tokyo, one of the biggest stories was Simone Biles opting not to compete to preserve mental health. I know like Michael Phelps, who's one of the most decorated Olympians of all time, had major troubles when returning back to normal civilization and normal life. I actually had Molly Seidel on the Free Trail podcast a few months ago where we talked about an episode of depression she dealt with after she shocked the world and brought home a bronze in the marathon in Tokyo. So, not easy to be a pro athlete, as we all know, and especially when your shot only comes once every 4 years, it just concentrates the consequences that you at least perceive are attached to your performance. So shout out to all the athletes who've been competing over there in Paris. So freaking inspiring, so entertaining, and I hope each and every one of them comes back in a good headspace, proud of their achievements. Anything else on the Olympics before we move on?
No, just every 2 years. That'd be great. Let's
Yeah,
do
every
that.
2 years. Credit second nature with that idea, please.
You're welcome. Oh, and add trail running too. I got just
Oh,
the announcer
hey,
for
that's
you.
going to happen, by the way. I had Greg
What?
Valet on the podcast. I mean, probably not in the next cycle or two, but Greg Valet, I had him on the Free Trail podcast. He's in charge of the Golden Trail series, which is basically the prototype model of what would be implemented in the Olympics. And he seems to think that it's an inevitability that trail running will be included in the Olympics. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but like I used to be kind of, my instinct was like, it doesn't feel right for our sport. But now, I mean, I've been having so much fun watching this, and ski mountaineering is going to be in the Olympics in Cortina, which is going to be sick and sort of a sister sport to trail running. So, and there's a lot of Americans who are like, hoping to make the team, who are crossover athletes between ski mountaineering and trail running. So, an interesting thing we can talk about in a future episode.
You heard it here
Yeah.
first.
Moving on, I wanted to talk to you about one thing that came up in the ketone pod. and that I
Mhm.
think will lead to a fun discussion here with our audience. And what Michael Brandt said that I thought was maybe the most poignant comment was about how they started with this ambition to be a multifaceted biohacking supplement brand. And then they realized really their hero product and their hero innovation was the ketones. And the way they realized that was that's what the market told them. And I think that's a really interesting thing that the two of us could talk about as it relates to building brands, businesses, and careers in the outdoor industry. Thinking about what Free Trail has done, which is, of course, at a much smaller scale than what Ketone IQ has done. We started as this weird, like, training and holistic health app, and then people, the market told us, you guys are a trail running media company. And we kind of knew instinctively also that we were a trail running media company. And so we listened to the market, we listened to our instinct and rebranded, pivoted, embraced who we really were. And it's been great for business and great for, the health of each of us who work on the team. But it made me want to bring up with you. You can add whatever you want, but you and I talk a lot off the mic about second nature and what we want this to be. And I think a great way for us to figure that out is to have that dialogue together publicly and with our audience. So, opening the door
Mhm.
to you, Lucy, maybe you could fill in some of our listeners about some of the ideas that we have for second nature, and then maybe we can leave our listeners with a prompt to give us some feedback so we know what to do with it.
Yeah, well, one of the best quotes is the Mike Tyson, "Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face."
Totally.
And, that audience feedback or business, sales feedback in Michael's case, obviously was that punch in the face that they needed to know, like, "Oh, this is what's working. We should probably double down here. We should probably get rid of these things that aren't delivering to the end goal of what we're trying to create here." And I think you and I, when it really comes down to it, like, our goal is to really celebrate and help people, engage with the business of the outdoor industry, whether that's getting jobs, which is why we have the LinkedIn page where we're, uh, posting a bunch of jobs. Shout out Matt Sharkey. And why we have these conversations and why we bring people on to just show the different ways that you can be involved, whether it's, the conversation we're releasing next week with Jess, whether it's, the stuff that Ian talks about. There's all kinds of different angles that we can share. And I think everything that we do, we just want to have an extension of that conversation. And so there's so many different ways that we could expand and bring value to the audience and be, in conversation with the audience. And so what does that look like? Obviously, we're going to keep doing the podcast. We heard the feedback, do 2 a week, and here we are. But what more can we do? I would love to figure out a way to do some live events where we can go out and have a round table with some people and have some hang time with everybody and really get that face time with everybody to capture even more feedback, because we do get quite a few messages on the LinkedIn and the Instagram account, but I feel like that in-person stuff is really useful for us to make sure that we're going the right direction. I think one of the main pieces that really kind of set us off on this journey was the podcast that we did on Free Trail about athlete marketing and athlete sponsorship. And so I think maybe there's a level of courses that we could offer up based on that knowledge and going even deeper in, uh, brand marketing with working with athletes trying to get sponsorships, maybe even podcasting 101. I don't know. There's a lot of different directions that we could go. And I think really it's all rooted in delivering value to our audience. But yeah, what is the most valuable thing? I think it's got to start with just getting out there with our audience and having those conversations in person, because I feel like you get a lot of insights in person. And I know for me too, with Super Rider, my biggest insight came when I least expected it at Sea Otter. All these mountain bikers started coming up to me being like, "I know you do trials, but actually it works really well for mountain biking."
Mm.
And the second I leaned into that, my stuff 10x'd. So
The market told you what
yeah,
you needed to do.
yeah, exactly. What do you think?
Well,
Where do you want to?
so you and I have talked a lot about buttoning sort of an agency product onto second nature media that would allow us to help brands and athletes navigate the business terrain and the industry. So I think the easiest place for us to start would be to do something that helped athletes understand what brands are looking for. I think you have more experience than anybody in that regard. I've been a professional athlete for a long time. What that looks like, it could be a course, could be some sort of a community that gets together and we do a mastermind or a brainstorming session or a webinar of some kind to help athletes understand how to make a proposal, how to differentiate themselves. Similarly, with brands, we could evaluate their ambassador and athlete program and strategy and provide input and consultation about what things we might change if we were sitting in their seat on the brand side. I think also the value of just maybe putting together a Slack community of people who work in the industry who want to network with other people and, maybe even use that as an opportunity to, find new opportunities career wise or co-founders to start their own brand or something like that. I mean, we have a community element to free trail, and that's easily the funnest and best part of what we do. And so I think we
Mm.
could do something similar on a B2B level with second nature. So those are a few ideas. So to our listeners here, let us know if that sounds compelling to you. Would you join the second nature community? Send us a DM on Instagram or leave a comment on LinkedIn. Send us a DM on LinkedIn. And we want to take this to the next level. We will take it to the next level. There will be some iteration along the way. We will probably launch things, listen to the market, see what happens. And then simultaneously, as we've teased a million times, we're working on something else that we'll tell you all
Mm.
about here in the future that we're going to definitely want feedback from the audience on also. But specific to second nature, let us know what you want. Let us know what you want us to be, how we can serve you, and we would love to fill that void.
Yeah, the other thing I would add in is, wouldn't it be cool if instead of just running an ad, we did something that was a little bit more engaged with the partners that we have, where we could actually go and talk to them and see behind the scenes and share even more, where it wasn't just like a read, but it was like, hey, we're gonna actually show you more. And if you're gonna work with us, then you gotta like show us behind the curtain a little
Yeah.
bit. And so it's more of it's not a transactional thing, but there's actually some intention behind the people we partner with. I think that'd be a really interesting way to kind of be intentional about how we move forward on some of this stuff too. But yeah, there's so much that we want to do, and so many ways that I think we can be valuable to the people that are listening and beyond. And we're starting to see that, on LinkedIn, we're seeing a ton of responses, and on Instagram, same thing. Like all the places, the newsletter as well. People are engaging with us, which is really exciting. It means that we're talking about something that they care about, and that hopefully we're sharing some insight that they find useful. And if we could find even more ways beyond just doing this twice a week, that'd be cool too.
Hell yeah. I love your idea about doing events. Like if we did just like industry networking event in Denver or in Portland and just brought people together who work on the brand side at agencies, professional athletes, content creators, do like a panel discussion, mix and mingle, have a couple frosties. Let's do it. Second nature. Here we go.
Let's
You
do
want to
it.
do a job of the week before we do BPC?
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right,
Here's
wait, let me
one.
set this up, okay?
Oh, all
A
right.
big
Yeah.
all I want to say is big thank you to Matt Sharkey for curating the
Yes.
jobs that we post on our LinkedIn account. Go search secondnature.media on LinkedIn. We are not going to be discussing being Dylan Bowman's Strava jockey, but that position is available. Aaron, tell us the position you want to talk about today.
All right. Merrill has a creative director role open. It's a full time job, hybrid. You don't have to be in the office all the time, according to this. I love the first line of the job description: provide visionary leadership to the creative team, inspiring them and guiding them to produce cutting edge and impactful work. How great. Merrill, they do quite a bit of volume, right? They're doing their thing, but to have a creative director, somebody who come in and really put their mark on this brand and drive it in maybe a new direction. They've been signing some athletes, right? Didn't you say they had a bunch of new people on
Yep.
board?
Yeah, and they just did a cool, I just looked it up. It looks like Merrill did 100. Wait a second, that can't be right. According to Wikipedia, Merrill did in the third quarter of sales that ended October 1st, 2022, Merrill posted its total revenue of 198 million in a
There you
quarter.
go. Wow.
Merrill is an $800 million annual brand. Is that right? Anyway, I
There
got
you go.
distracted. What did you ask me? Yes, they have been signing athletes, and I actually had a great exchange with a guy at Speed Goat. I'll look up his name. His first name was Sean, but he works in the footwear department there at Merrill. Merrill's owned by Wolverine, based in Michigan. I think Wolverine also owns Saucony. And yeah, they've been signing athletes, Corey Waltering, among others. And they just released a collab footwear product with Janji, who's been making big waves on the apparel side. Actually, Dave Spandorfer, the CEO of Janji, was one of our earliest listeners who sent us one of those early bits of feedback. So shout out Dave. We got to get him on the pod still. But yeah, you
Amazing.
see the Merrell product out a lot. Actually, at TRE last year, they were kind of the biggest surprise to me in terms of the quality of product. It was really my first time interacting with it up close, and it seems like Merrell is making some really good trail running product. Can't say that I've used it myself, but they've been doing a good job.
800 million. They've got a line of tactical boots. I wonder if there's like a military contract in here too. But still, that's mega. So anyway, if you were the creative director, you've got a lot to play with over here. And with new athletes coming in and some of the new collabs that they're doing, but the opportunity to build beyond that is pretty incredible. This could be a really fun one for the right person.
Okay, so now I just pulled up the daily from Outdoor Retailer, trying to get a more accurate visual into their revenue. Okay, so Merrill's coming off a disappointing quarter, looks like. Quarterly revenue decreased 20% year over year from 176 million in the same quarter last year to 142 million this year. It has been a tough market, so who knows what to attribute that to. We could do a little bit more homework here and revisit it in a future episode, but still it remains clear that Merrill is a very big business. And yeah, that creative director job, what a great opportunity to go in and make a difference. Remember, in an early episode we talked about how I had an interaction with a creative director at a Silicon Valley tech company, and she had said to me that I asked her, what does it mean to be the creative director? And she says, I exist between brand and product. And so this would be a good opportunity to go exist between the Merrell brand and the Merrell product, which, as I said, is pretty good. And yeah, good opportunity in the outdoor space.
So cool.
Do some storytelling, lead the brand vision, be the creative director at Merrell. Shout out to Matt Sharkey for curating all these great lists of jobs, which you can follow at Second Nature Media on LinkedIn. Lucy, let's close with BPC.
Let's do it. You want to go
Sure, I'll go
first?
first. I got a funny one today that I think you're going to appreciate, a little non-traditional. So I got a voicemail from a good buddy over the weekend, and it made me just realize voicemail is a good product. I know you disagree with that, Lucy, because
I
whenever
do.
I call you and you don't pick up, you say, for the fastest response, please just send me a text. And I have to say, the joy that I received, maybe it's because I have a nostalgic feeling as an aging person for the traditional voicemail. I really enjoyed it. And so that's my product this week, voicemail. But what I also wanted to say is the amazingness of the spontaneous phone call, right? Which you and I do literally like multiple
Every
times a
day.
day, right?
Yeah.
We just call each other on the phone. And I know you do that with a lot of people. I do too. But how great is a spontaneous phone call, right? When
The
people
best.
want to set up Zoom calls, I've now settled into a habit of saying, "Hey, just call me on my cell. Call me on my cell
Mhm.
anytime. I'll be around rather than like put something on the calendar, which inevitably pulls me out of my focused deep work time. Call me on my cell. And if I don't pick up, leave me a voicemail. That's my BPC, Lucy.
There's a famous mountain bike free rider, but also now he does a lot of announcing on events for Red Bull. His name is Cam McCall, and his voicemail for a long time was, uh, "Leave me a voicemail, tell me a joke, and if I laugh, I'll call you back." And that was a lot of pressure. But yeah, I mean, I man, the phone call is the all time and the best hack for phone calls. I get so many steps in every day because I take calls and just go for walks. And that extra couple miles just kind of adds up. I'm going on a little walk around my neighborhood talking to people. And I just feel like not a lot of people call people anymore. And it's kind of a bummer because I just love like having a long conversation with somebody about random stuff. And honestly, that's the impetus for this podcast. You and I would just call each other and be like, "Yo, did you see this? Can you believe this? Look at this thing over there." And then eventually we got to a point where we're like, what would be cool is if we just turn this phone call into a podcast. And here we are. So, not underrated talking to people on the phone, I would say.
Spontaneous phone calls. You know what the Europeans do is this voice notes nonsense, you know?
Oh yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Call me on the cell phone and then leave me a voicemail, please.
The voice
The
notes thing
voice
I
note.
can't do because that was the whole reason why I had the text me, because I was always probably in a meeting, and so I could quickly respond back versus having to sit down and have a 5-second break to listen to this thing. Like, yeah, I don't know. Text or call me. Don't leave me a voicemail.
Couple of old guys here.
All right. All right. Here's my BPC. Map the Gaps by Yeti. Have you heard about this
No,
one?
tell me.
Oh my goodness. Okay, how many times a day do you use Google Maps, right? I mean, at least for me, I'm on it 3 or 4 times a day
Often,
minimum.
yeah.
I don't know if I could actually survive without Google Maps. So Yeti, the company that makes the water coolers and the, jugs and stuff like that, had a new pack called the Hopper, and their way of promoting it, they actually built this big campaign called Map the Gaps. On Google Maps, there were all these trails that they were trying to show, but they didn't have the 360 like they do on the roads. And so Yeti identified a bunch of trails that hadn't been mapped yet with the 360. They put their ambassadors on those trails with the new Yeti pack and a 360 camera so that you can see the pack perfectly when you're trying to do the 360 of the trail. And they sent their ambassadors out on all those trails to capture that footage. And then they uploaded it to Google Maps. So anytime you're like, oh, what is the Little Grand Canyon Trail or the Sun Mountain Trail or uh, the Dipsy Trail, whatever, if you wanted to look at the 360 of that, you're getting a view of Conrad Anchor with the Yeti backpack on. Okay, the interesting thing about this, other than like what a clever way to like take something that's hiding in plain sight and turning it into a marketing thing, through this campaign, they boosted the sales for this pack 300%.
Dang.
How sick is
Yeah.
that? That's what I got.
Wow. Very, very cool. We'll make sure to link to this stuff in the show notes. We're going to link to how to leave a voicemail in the show notes. Leaving you with a controversial take here, Lucy. Apple Maps far superior as a product to Google Maps. Comments?
Wow. Really?
That's my opinion,
I
man.
don't know. I'm team Google. I
All
don't know.
right.
I haven't used the Apple Maps in a while, but
All right. So to our listeners, who won the debate? Who won the debate? Apple Maps or Google Maps? And also let us know what you want us to do here with Second Nature. Would you join the community? Would you come to one of our events? Please do let us know. We'll be happy to hear from you. Any closing comments from you, Aaron?
oh, you know what? I got to give a big shout out to my buddy Dre. He was the one that originally caught Map the Gaps. We've linked him a couple times in our newsletter, but brand new story that was actually on one of his. So I got to give credit where credit's due. That guy, I swear, every single time he writes a newsletter, I close every other window on my computer and I just sit and read it. It's online, but it's definitely a lean back moment for me. Every single time he writes a newsletter, I'm just like, everybody just hold on a second. and I got to read through this thing. So that's where that came from. Credit where credit's due.
Nice callback to last week's episode, a lean back moment. Shout out to Dre. Go subscribe to brand new story.substack.com. I think it is. We'll put a link in the show notes here too. What a great episode, Aaron. What a great week. Listeners, we appreciate y'all. Hope you have an amazing weekend. We'll see you next week.